Welcome everybody to another episode of Politics in the Time of Corona. We are actually now on a new set or a slightly different set because these chairs that we were sitting on, Noura and I, created a lot of additional anxiety at this time. So they were not comfortable. So we are rearranging things. Thank you for joining us, and thanks to our wonderful guests who are joining us from Palestine. And I'm joined, of course, by Noura Aliqat. My name is Bassam Haddad, and Noura will introduce our guests, and we will get on with it.
Welcome, Sahar Francis and Dana Faraj. We're excited to have you on this program today, which is different than what we've done in the past few episodes, as we focus particularly on punishment in Palestine in the time of Corona. You are both based in Ramallah. And so briefly, I want to introduce you to our guest. Sahar Francis is the director of the Ad-Damir Prisoner Support and Human Rights Association and an attorney, a fabulous attorney, we must add. And Dana Faraj is also an attorney, a legal researcher, and one of the coordinators of the Stop Collective Punishment campaign. Welcome. We're excited to have you with us.
Thanks. Thank you.
We've started every program by doing the only way you can start a program, which is asking, how have you been?
And how have you been dealing with this, even at the personal and familiar level and so on?
So it's a very difficult time because as working with the Palestinian prisoners, actually, it's really very hard to see how the families are very worried because they're not allowed to visit and they're totally disconnected. Actually, all the Palestinian prisoners inside the Israeli prisons are totally disconnected. So we in Ad-Damir, we're still working and trying to do lots of efforts in order to fill this gap of the uncertainty that the families feel. So for me, it's even more difficult on the personal level because I'm like, my family is not in Ramallah and I'm in between Ramallah and Hassouta, my village. It's too far and too complicated to cross the checkpoints and back and forth, so it's really very difficult time.
Okay, for me, I'm okay. I'm based in Ramallah with my family, but we are also worried about some members of my family who are also in Israeli jails. But I'm personally good and working from home. Happy to be with you.
Thank you to you both, and strength to you both. Sahar, based on what you're telling us, we'd love to pick up from there. There has been acute attention about particularly vulnerable populations, refugees who don't have a place to quarantine, and prisoners, of course, who don't have adequate health care or sanitary conditions in places where they're already confined. That could not be more true than in Israeli detention, where Palestinian political prisoners are and whom you represent. We've learned recently that there was a prisoner who was released, Noor al-Samsour, or Sarsour, excuse me, Sarsour, who was tested positive for Corona. So can you tell us about what the situation looks like on the inside and how you're responding to this?
Actually, it's really very serious and very worrying because first, like the conditions in general in the Israeli prisons for the Palestinian political prisoners are not good. There's a serious problem with the healthcare in general. So imagine now in the time of the Corona how serious it could be. And secondly, because of the restrictions and the measures that the Israeli prison authority decided to implement in these weeks, actually they immediately canceled all the family visits. A week after, they canceled all the lawyers' visits to the prisons and interrogation centers. So basically, these 5,000 prisoners are totally disconnected from the outside world, especially because they don't have access for phone calls as well. So they cannot communicate with their families. And rooms are very crowded, of course, and this is very sensitive in the corona. They cannot keep the distance of 2 meters one from another. They didn't, the prison authority didn't offer them any special hygiene or sanitary staff. They don't do the basic things actually in order to protect them. And when it comes for the staff, like the policemen and the soldiers or the interrogators or the people that comes in and out from the prison, we don't know how much they are protected, because actually the case that you mentioned, most probably this guy was infected. We don't know, because he was arrested for less than 3 weeks actually. They never checked him while he was in prison. He was released, and then he was checked by the Palestinian Authority health, the health ministry, and then when he was positive, till now in Ofer prison, they didn't took the correct measures. Like they just isolated the 9 people who were in the same section, but not the other prisoners, like other prisoners who maybe came in contact with him. They were never checked. And also those who were checked, they just check the temperature of the person. They don't do the proper blood check or any other special check. There's a serious problem in interrogation centers as well, because they keep arrest people. They send them immediately for the 14 days of quarantine. They don't interrogate them. The conditions in the isolation is so bad. The rooms are not equipped. Some detainees spend 2 weeks without having the ability to make shower or to get to change their underwears. This is terrible, and we were forced to go to the court in order to guarantee such basic rights.
Sahad, I want to ask you a question. How much of this is an endemic feature of prisoner and Israeli detention, of being a Palestinian prisoner in Israeli detention, and how much of it is unique to this particular moment of the corona crisis?
Actually, if comparing in general with the conditions, it's not so unique, because prisoners usually face lots of problems on the health level and in the isolation and in all the punishments that they face, and the lack of the proper treatment for them inside the prison. And there's lots of restrictions always on family visits, lawyers' meetings, and so on. But now it becomes more severe. And when comparing with the measures that were taken for criminal prisoners inside Israel, this makes it very discriminating measures, because at least Israeli prisoners can call their families on daily basis. They have public phones in their sections. Although they are not getting family visits, but they can communicate with their families. They can get more free time outside their cells. They can purchase more things from the canteen. Like in this corona time, the prison authority restricted as well the stuff that the prisoners can buy from the canteen, including things to clean their own cells and hygiene stuff to protect themselves. So this makes it really looks like very discriminating policy now under the corona virus.
So there's even disparate treatment between Israeli and Palestinian detainees. That's very telling.
Yeah, this is always like it should be highlighted that the conditions of the Palestinian prisoners classified as security prisoners makes them suffer more and get more restrictions, punishments on daily basis in general. So now in the corona time, it's even worse.
Dana, I want to shift to you on the same theme. What's been really evident is that the Israeli oppression has not relented even in the moment of a global pandemic that doesn't discriminate between people of who it can infect, and yet Israel has been relentless in its punitive regime, as highlighted by Sahad in prisons, but also highlighted in the work that you do in the campaign to stop collective punishment. And I think part of your focus in that campaign has been to stop home demolitions. Can you tell us a little bit about your work and what that looks like in recent weeks during the pandemic?
Yeah. Actually, we started the campaign at the end of February in response to the judgment of the so-called Israeli High Court of Justice to demolish the family homes of two political prisoners, Yazan Mghamis and Walid Hanache, starting at that moment by the 1st of March. The two homes were demolished in the midst of the spreading of coronavirus on the 5th of March. So we are a group of Palestinian and international lawyers, activists, and human rights defenders. And we launched this campaign against the policy of Israeli regime in punitive home demolitions, as it comes in grave violation of international humanitarian law, international human rights law, and customary international law. Since the Israeli regime has engaged in collective punishment against Palestinians since the beginning of the military occupation in 1967, based on the defense emergency regulations of 45, inherited from the British administration of mandatory Palestine. And this policy has intensified during the first and second intifadas, and also the latest popular uprising in 2015, particularly in Jerusalem. So although in early March, the World Health Organization declared the novel outbreak of COVID-19 coronavirus a pandemic and urged all governments to take appropriate measures to slow its spread, and reiterated that people should stay at their homes. The so-called Israeli High Court of Justice confirmed that last week that starting by 8th of April 2020, which means tomorrow, the family home of political prisoner Qassam al-Barghouti can be demolished at any time. And we know all that home is usually a highly appreciated personal space. Home is where the heart is. Home is safety and memories, happy and sad memories of childhood, friendships, personal relations, books, photos, everything. So a family home is not just a property, it is as sacred as the family itself. And home demolitions comes in extreme violation of the right to residence and the housing, and also the right of private property.
So this like in the case of Sahra's description of the condition of prisoners, you're bringing up two issues, right? One is the consistency of Israeli policy and oppression, which is home demolitions that have been a significant feature of Israeli occupation. And with that, collective punishment, which for the audience who doesn't know, it's in response to the punishment of one, you punish an entire group, either for the pure sense of punishment or to coerce that particular individual into some action. So, right, the Gaza blockade is the most grotesque form of collective punishment upon 2 million people for what Israel and the United States and the European Union are claiming are Hamas's violations. Then there's the other issue, which is now in the middle of a pandemic, rather than protect people and find extraordinary measures in order to create homes, to provide and to ensure quarantine, the Israeli High Court of Justice, between two quotes as you indicate, is demolishing that shelter for them. So how do you communicate? I mean, this is just so obscene. How do you communicate that in the course of your campaign and the work that you're trying to do? The normalcy of it, the continuity, and also the absurd nature of it.
Yeah. Actually, Israel does not never respect any elementary principles of humanity. Even further, Israel continues its aggressive politics against protected civilians, people, in humanitarian law. And in response to the WHO call, many countries are implementing restrictive and protective action plans, including closing borders, complete lockdowns of cities. Meanwhile, in these moments, all human beings are suffering an international health crisis, as you mentioned. And while the WHO is calling for staying at homes and repeats the measures of social distance, Israel, starting by tomorrow, can invade in any moment the village of Kobar near Ramallah. to demolish another Palestinian home and make people homeless. And this has nothing to do with the basic recommendations in order to not spread the coronavirus. And maybe it is worth mentioning that these home demolitions normally occur in Area A, which is based on the bilateral agreements of Oslo, is considered a complete controlled area by the Palestinian Authority. And the last demolition of Walid Hanach's home was in the heart of Ramallah, which is the center of the Palestinian Authority's institutions and the so-called government.
And for those who are unfamiliar, that kind of fragmented jurisdictional regime highlights the complete lack of any authority that Palestinians have over their lives, given how Israeli occupation forces can transgress these borders. Sahar, the idea of collective punishment, and specifically in these cases that Dana is bringing up, it's like after the Palestinian has already been punished in Israeli detention without any form of due process or any way to articulate their cause, they're then punished afterwards again and again, that the punishment is long lasting. And I'm sure that you see that in your work on behalf of the political prisoners as well.
Yes, of course. Actually, this is a very extreme policy that the Israelis were using for decades now. And each time the Israeli High Court is iterating this policy the ironic thing that also discrimination is taking place on this level. Like if you take the settlers who were involved in killing Palestinians, like burning the Dawabshi family or Abu Khdeir or the other cases, of course, their homes wouldn't be demolished. Like their families would never be punished. And this is why we claim it's a collective punishment, because you arrest the Palestinian person, you torture him, you drove him to give a confession under such very serious torture, and then you prosecute him and convict him and send him for life sentence, open life sentence, that is not limited, and then you demolish his house and you punish the whole family. And they do it in every year and repeat it, and they don't care. As Dana mentioned, they don't care if it's a house under the PA jurisdiction or not. They just, I don't think that for them all this classification of area A, B, and C is existing anymore. Security can justify, and the main reason for the High Court to justify such practices actually is security. And they claim that it could prevent other people, which they know exactly that no, it's not a preventive measure. The opposite. In some cases, it will cause some other people to go out and to resist more because of these policies. The problem here that Israel is immune on the international level. They're not accountable for all these war crimes. Like collective punishment is a war crime according to the Fourth Geneva Convention and definitely the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. But here, we are stuck with this investigation by the prosecutor office in the ICC for a couple of years now without any hope that it will lead for serious accountability. And I think this is what makes Israel behave in this way, that they don't care because they don't pay the price. They're not accountable for any of the war crimes and the crimes against humanity that they are committing on a very systematic way. And this is why they allow themselves to repeat all these violations, even with this COVID-19 circumstances, where all the world were calling for ways how to protect people, like on the level of the prisoners. Every country were requested by the UN High Commissioner to think about releasing prisoners in this difficult moment in order to protect them, not to keep them, where the occupying power is continuing arresting people every day, renewing administrative detention orders for people that they are 74 years old, or sick people that they are really under a very serious health threat that they suffer. And if they would be infected, that's it. Like maybe they will die inside prison, and they're insisting in not releasing and not like respecting what the international community, the UN, is offering, like asking countries to do in these days.
Following up on a question that was addressed earlier, so during this time, is Israel paying less attention to quote unquote norms because it is taking advantage of the fact that most other countries, the international community is busy, or because there was a discussion about, you shared something about this is a time when governments are supposed to actually provide more to even to prisoners and so on. Is so Noor asked earlier if this is a function of Israel's apartheid policies and Israel's ordinary policies of punishment and incarceration, or is this getting worse as a result of the blind eye or as a result of the preoccupation of the international community? And the other question, very quickly before we run out of time, what is the situation in Gaza prisons, and is there a model that could be presented in Gaza prisons of releasing prisoners, of dealing with the situation in a way that could actually demonstrate a stark difference, or do we not see a movement on that front?
On the first question, actually, Israel is behaving always in this way. They don't care about the international law. They don't care. They know that they will not be accountable, not very soon at least. But I think it makes it the sensitivity of the spread, like the problems of the coronavirus situation, makes it more difficult and more serious in this way that Israel is behaving, at least on the prisoners level, let's say, but I think in all the other levels, because the usual business of the occupation is continuing, actually, irrelevant to the emergency situation that they declared since the beginning of March. On the other question, unfortunately, Domir is not able to access Gaza, so we don't know much about the current situation on the Gaza prisons, actually. But I think, like at least on the PA side, on the West Bank, we were demanding the PA as well as an organization with the other colleagues, human rights, Palestinian human rights organizations, to make sure to release prisoners, and they did actually. They released those who were sentenced, and their sentences were about to be like finishing soon. Unfortunately, it's not clear what about the political prisoners on the PA side. You know, the problem that the PA is not admitting that they have political prisoners at all. So they don't admit that they need to release political prisoners, though we felt there's no new arrests lately in the last 2-3 weeks in the PA side, though there is still several prisoners who were arrested for political affiliation and were sentenced for long period. They were not released with this group of the prisoners that the PA released, and we are continuing the pressure as organizations on the PA.
Dana, just shifting to you a little bit and thinking about, you know, the explicit discriminatory practices, the distinction, right? The collective punishment is only applied to Palestinians, the distinction between the treatment of Israeli and Palestinian prisoners, and obviously the campaigns that you're engaging in. What has been the response and your ability to connect with people globally as we're all quarantined, but unable to mobilize this campaign, and how it's been received?
Yeah, actually, when we started, we tried to translate our first statement to Spanish, Espanol, English, Spanish, sorry, French, English, and Arabic to reach the most people in the world. So we contacted also solidarity movement in different countries. and they were very positive with us. Also, we contacted Palestinian NGOs, particularly Al-Haq, who worked since many years on this issue. And they have also many reports on home demolitions and the collective punishment. I would like also to mention something which was very remarkable with the Trump's peace plan. Actually, it stipulates that Israel is not obliged to stop its punitive demolition following, in quotations, acts of terrorism, which is for us as Palestinians is a legitimate resistance. So we can see how a third party state as the United States of America is practicing to encourage Israel in its systematic punitive policy. Instead of helping in prosecute Israel for its war crimes. According to Al-Haq report, for example, Israel has demolished since 1967 around 2,000 Palestinian homes in practice of punitive measures. But at the end, we can say that it is very painful for us to see our homes built with the sweat and toil of families for generations to be destroyed by the Zionist Israeli apparatus. But most importantly, we repeat what many Palestinians say. They can demolish the stones, not our memory, not our resistance, and we will rebuild again and again to continue our struggle for freedom. Maybe I have a last word to all the audience. So here, by the name of our campaign, Stop Collective Punishment, we urge upon all humanitarian organizations and every person who value his home as all other human beings to stand with us to stop this Israeli punitive demolition policy, to pressure also on the International Court, Criminal Court, as we said, to investigate home demolitions as war crimes. Homes are being demolished, justified by illogical and colonial pretexts that only serve Israel's ongoing need for revenge.
Thank you so much for that, Dana. And to our listeners and viewers, we do encourage you to heed that call. And before we turn to you, Sahar, to also wrap up with your final thoughts and words, I just wanted, because you highlighted the Trump administration's collusion in this process, to highlight that one of the longest standing U.S. policies has been to support Israel in its withholding of now $181 million in tax revenue. In some sort of a collective punishment because of the Palestinian official policy of supporting families of martyrs. And so this also is holding hostage an entire society and also undermining response to the public health crisis in this moment by not distributing those funds for much needed medical supplies. And so yes, the US collusion is not only deep, but quite sinister because of the logic of victim blaming that Palestinians put this upon themselves. So thank you for bringing that to bear. So Sahar, with that, can you help us wrap up with your final thoughts and any messages you would have with the audience?
Yeah. So actually, thank you very much for this opportunity. I think it's a very important platform that we can send our message to all of the activists and the supporters, especially for the Palestinian prisoners cause. Next week is the Prisoners' Day, the 17th of April. So I would ask people to join the campaign of Damir on Free Our Prisoners, because of the corona, but in general, because this is the aim that all these political prisoners should be released because they are arrested of the conflict. And I would encourage people to visit the website of Damir and all the other social media to get the information and to join the different activities and the calls for action that we issue in this special day, actually. All the month of April would be a month for the prisoners.
Thank you so much, Sahar and Dana, for giving us your time at this very difficult situation and under the most horrible of circumstances as usual where you're at and doing what you are doing on a daily basis. We really thank you and appreciate all your efforts and hope to speak with you under better circumstances. Unless Noura has something else to say, we're gonna say goodbye and hopefully we'll be in touch soon. Take care of yourselves. Be safe. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.